Moving on to item number 10, the Old Town Parking and Parking Garage Update, possible creation of the new Capital Improvement Plan CIP project. Our presenter is Dan Worth, Public Works Director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have an agenda item in front of you with one request, which you can see on the screen. It's to adopt a resolution authorizing the creation of a new project for a parking garage in the northeast quadrant. And I'll show you some details on what we're talking about in the rest of the presentation. But it would authorize the creation of the project and fund $2 million for the current fiscal year, which began today, to pay for the beginning of design and development of that project. The agenda language that is posted also allows for discussion of options at other locations in Old Town. And I'll go into that a little bit in the rest of the presentation. But we're only asking you to approve one thing, but we have agendized it so you can give us direction on other issues as well. I want to go over what we talked about a few months ago. We had a work study in April. We centered much of the discussion on two different locations. On the left is a very conceptual look at adding 2 decks above the existing parking garage, the parking corral at First and Brown in the southern half of the city, or the southern half of Old Town, the northern half of Old Town, northeast quadrant. We're talking about the garage on the right, Stetson 6th Avenue, currently surface parking. The proposal is to build a garage with 1 at-grade and 1 above-grade deck. You can see the costs for the different options associated with those projects. That was the bulk of the discussion in April. We presented you 2 options. They both built a garage at each location. The difference was the number of decks at the First and Brown location. They both needed additional funding, which would likely come from the general fund. So those were the 2 options that we presented. We had a lot of good discussion, and we got a lot of feedback. And I think the primary feedback that we got fits into 3 different categories. There was a great deal of concern expressed about spending bond money in the northeast quadrant. There is a feeling that the wording that we had in the promotional material for the bond election in 2019 led one reasonably to believe that we're going to spend this money south of Indian School Road, not north of Indian School Road. We heard that, and I want to address that. I'm going to address each of these 3 major points as we go through the presentation. The second bullet, we propose 1 or 2 additional decks above the existing garage at First and Brown. The existing garage is an at-grade level and a below-grade level. So adding a deck, adding 2 decks, it would come up out of the ground. You'd get some verticality. Mayor expressed some concern, and others seconded the idea that might be incompatible with the design aesthetic that we have in the historic Old Town area that this garage sits adjacent to. And then the third bullet, we clearly heard support for each location. Some of you supported one location, some of you supported the other, some of you supported both, but we clearly heard support for garages at each of the locations. So I want to address each of these in turn. First, the idea of, or the thought that the commitment in the bond promotional materials to spend the money south of Indian School. The 3 graphics here, if you look at the one on the left, this is what could have happened if all 3 of the alternatives that we listed specifically in the bond fact sheet were built. Up at the top, you can see a +1. We didn't know this at the time, but the Panera Bread lot, the First Avenue lot, is small, and if we built a structure on it, we have to abide by the setbacks that are required for buildings. We'd have to have ADA accessibility, which raises the height to the ceiling on the first floor, to the point where the ramps are so steep you can't park cars on them. You add all this stuff together, and we didn't add any spaces. It made no sense to build that garage. But that was one of the 3 locations that was listed in the bond material. In the lower left of that left-hand graphic, you can see the plus 133. This was adding a below-grade level under the surface parking at the Sagebrush Theater. And the thought was that that below-grade parking would, at that point in time, we were discussing the possibility of having public parking in the Museum Square project. This below-grade level could have potentially connected to that. And then the lower right is adding 1 level to the First and Brown garage. So we could have done those 3 things, fully complied with the language that was, or the suggested locations that were in that bond promotional material, and would have given us a net increase of 231 spaces. The middle graphic is what's going on now. Instead of building a garage and getting 1 space, we're proposing to use the bond money to pay for 55 spaces that we've negotiated in the Artisan development about 300 feet away. So essentially the same location. Instead of building 133 spaces below grade level at Sagebrush, we're not going to do that. We are reconfiguring Sagebrush surface parking to add 33 spaces, and we have bought and paid for 155 spaces in the Museum Square development. And that is still in the works. We have meetings scheduled to try to further this project along. We fully believe we're going to get those spaces. So without doing anything else, those 3 things add up to 243 spaces. We've already gotten commitments to build more spaces than we could have ended up with if we did everything in the bond pamphlets. And then on the right, it's basically the graphic in the middle plus what I'm talking about tonight. We could build a garage at each location, both the First and Brown location and the northeast quadrant. If we built the garage, if we built the addition, 1 deck in the First and Brown location, you get another 97 spaces. You get a net increase of 340. Compare that to the 230 that we could have got if we did everything that was in the bond language. I think we can make a strong case that we're keeping faith with what we told the voters we were going to do. So that's addressing that first point, and I'll come back to that. The design aesthetics, we did some renderings from a couple of different vantage points of what a 1-deck addition and what a 2-deck addition could look like at that location. This is the 1-deck addition. And let me back up the first bullet. During the discussion in April, the mayor also pointed out that we've got a potential partner to the south of this site in Honor Health. Might there be some opportunities to partner with them if they have any intention of building a garage to meet their needs? We could add some space to it to meet public needs. And we met with Honor Health. The reality is that they don't have any plans in the foreseeable future to build parking. And if they did, the need that they most identified was at the southern end of their campus, near their new neurological center. So not a location that would achieve the same impact that we're looking to achieve here. So we had that discussion. It doesn't appear to be viable. So looking at the aesthetics, this is what a 1-deck addition, and it doesn't change the appearance a lot because the existing garage is just the surface and the below grade. You don't see the below grade. The surface doesn't have walls. It has that canopy, and you can see the canopy in this rendering. It has a canopy that's intended to create a look that's compatible with the historic Old Town design aesthetic. If we added 1 deck, we would not add walls to the 2nd deck. We'd add a parapet. So the height would increase a little bit above that canopy, but it'd still be at a scale that's fairly well in keeping with, and you can see obviously the historic property of the church across the street. I'm the engineer. I'm not the guy that's going to tell you if it fits aesthetically. The architect has a better idea than that, than I do on that. But we hope to be able to show that 1 deck and possibly even 2 is acceptable. This is what 2 looks like. different vantage point. This is standing next to the garage and looking back towards the church. And you can see the one-deck addition on the left, two-deck addition on the right. Starts to look more like a parking garage, although this is just basically a block diagram. There are things that we would be able to do, that we would hope to do to, with finishes and appurtenances on that upper level that we could make it more compatible with the design aesthetic in the area. But just wanted to show you a couple of things that give us an idea of what the impact would be of adding a deck, adding two decks. And then finally, I mentioned in April we had support for garages in each location. So the proposal that we're giving you proposes garages in each location. I'm only asking you to approve creating one capital project. That would be for the northeast quadrant, and adding funding, which we have available now, $2 million from general fund contingency to get started on design for that project. The intent would then be to go through the CIP budget development process for the 25-26 CIP. This would be a project request to fund the rest of the cost for that parking garage. And you can see the cost down at the bottom, $15 million. We believe that, given the current reality, that there's a very strong chance that we'd be able to fund it in the 25-26 CIP. So the proposal would be general fund only, and then all the bond money goes to First and Brown. And this shows what it would look like if we built one additional deck. This slide is exactly the same as the last one. It shows what it would look like if we built two additional decks. You can see in either case, we have money left over. We pay for Artisan, we pay for First and Brown, either one deck or two decks, and then we would have money left over. Instead of spending that money in the northeast quadrant, we're going to do that with general fund. We'd spend that leftover money. If we were to spend it, we'd go back to the bond committee and entertain recommendations to bring back to you to spend that on another project in the same question. That was in question 2 of the bond, which includes park projects as well. So there are several opportunities where we have already allocated general fund money where we could replace that with bond money if we freed up bond money from the First and Brown parking garage, the Old Town parking garage. So that is really all I have for the presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions or address any concerns.
Thank you. At this point, let's go to public testimony, and then we'll come to Councilman Durham. I show Sonny Kirtley, French Thompson, and Bob Hedgeman. Patty Badnock has donated her time to Bob Hedgeman, so proceed. Thank you, Sonny.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Sonny Kirtley, but I'm reading a message from Marilyn Atkinson, who is the chairman of the Historic Old Town Architectural Committee. Mayor Ortega and City Council, we are in support of 2 levels for the parking garage at 2nd Street and Brown to add 216 spaces. The Historic Old Town Architectural Committee requests to be involved in the design so it complements the history and existing style of the building designs in the area. As a 60-plus year merchant in historic Old Town, I know from experience when an area is under construction, it is exceedingly difficult for businesses to maintain customers. We need the 2 levels to be done at one time so the merchant's business don't have to go through a construction period again at a later time when the city realizes the need for that additional parking. The cost for construction was approved by the voters in 2019 bond election, so the funds are available now, and there will be no need to have another separate bond election in later years for a second story. This is prudent use of city money because we know construction costs will increase with any delay. Yeah, history. Merchants won't have 2 construction periods to go through. The additional 2-level design in your packet shows that it's appropriate for the area for design and height. Also, it's important to remember that the key reasons to have more parking in this area is so the historic Old Town merchants survive and prosper by not having their valuable parking spaces used up during major events in the new Civic Center and spring training events at peak season. Remember that the 100-space Honor Health temporary parking can disappear at any time. If it does, building only one level will return the parking to the original current inventory. Bottom line, building 2 levels is the only way to actually increase the parking supply. We urge you to give direction to staff at the July 10th City Council meeting as part of the agenda to authorize the use of bond funds for building 2 additional levels on the Corral lot. This will add to the critically needed parking for this area of Old Town for many years to come. Thank you, Marilyn Atkinson.
Thank you. Next, we have French Thompson and then Bob Pedgman.
Mr. Mayor and City Council, thank you for having me here and public comment. She said that so calmly and just nice. I'm not really calm about this. I've been in business down there for 28 years, and I'm literally not calm about this situation. It's really time to stop procrastinating. On the thesaurus, it says it's called delaying, putting off doing, dawdling, hesitating, dragging one's feet, giving the runaround, playing a waiting game, playing for time, or postponing. I think you guys get my drift on what procrastination is. This bond was passed in 2019. Here we are 5 years later, and city staff is suggesting you direct the city to build another parking garage, not this, the one in the Corral in First and Brown. Since 2005, not one single parking place has been added to city-owned inventory. I made a presentation about how the city took away 650 parking places from the Giants Stadium with Google Earth images. In 1993, there were 177 more parking places where Museum Square is right now. There were 234 parking spaces, now there's only 57. These are the city's figures. I came up with these from that. So please stop procrastinating and direct city staff to build the 2 additional levels at Brown and First Street. We've got a very capable architect who's the mayor of this city that I know could direct and get a beautiful looking parking garage. I mean, I have confidence that that could happen, that the aesthetics could be done. The bond money that the taxpayers approved in 2019, and here we are 5 years later and the city's still procrastinating. In the meantime, the city spent $10 million on a roundabout. And now I'm driving up the street and I see that they're building a tunnel underneath Chaparral Road. Now I know that's got to be pretty expensive. There's a tunnel underneath Chaparral Road right across the street. Now, neither one of these projects are somebody's life, you know, it's something that's going to affect their livelihood. It might affect their convenience, but it's not affecting their livelihood. These parking garages affect people's livelihood. They need the parking for people to come downtown and do business with them. So I just urge you emotionally and very upset that please stop procrastinating and direct city staff to do the building of Brown and First Street and do the 2 levels. It's something that's been voted on, so please, get it done. If you build it, they'll come.
Next, Bob Pedgman, you got 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Ortega. Council members, name is Bob Pedgman, address is on the record. And I've talked about the history of the Northeast Quadrant because that's what the main topic of this agenda is. And back in the 1970s, the quadrants in Old Town had improvement districts. So what that meant is that all these districts or rather quadrants, participated in improvement districts where they taxed themselves to build public parking. The northeast quadrant, unfortunately, was not one of them. So back in the 1970s, they were given P2 credits and P3 credits without requiring them to invest and build their own parking. That's 50 years ago. Fast forward to today, that's why they have a parking shortage. There's no dispute that the Northeast Quadrant has a parking shortage. The dispute has been, what's the source of funding for them? Now, when you fast forward from the 70s all the way to 2019, when the bond initiative was put on the ballot, $21 million of that bond initiative was slated for Old Town parking because of shortages. I don't think that anyone who read that, maybe not anyone, but most people who read that ballot language, I don't think they thought that that's going to be the entertainment district, also known as the bar district. They thought Old Town is where it is. So when the money was tried to be diverted to the entertainment district, I called it bait and switch, and I still do. But now that's not the case anymore here today, because the city has found the $15 million out of the general fund money to dedicate to that. And that's great, so we support that. But we support it contingent or conditioned on, at the same time, in this meeting, this council approved the Northeast Quadrant funding with the general fund, and also direct staff to build 2 stories on the corral parking. Because if you do the first one without doing the second one, then you have all of a sudden put the Northeast Quadrant parking in front of the voters, what the voters approved in 2019. And that's going to be a slap in the face of the voters. That's not what we need right now, given what's up. Now, let me talk about the 2 stories. There has been some concern over the 2 stories being an eyesore or this or that, but I need to remind this council, this parking is for functional reasons primarily. And it can be made aesthetically to look good, by the way. And even what I see on the screen, the canopies and everything, and downward says it looks like a parking lot. Duh, it's a parking lot. But it can be made to look nice. And as French said, I'm sure that there's expertise here to do that. Now, also consider the fact that the Honor Health temporary lot will go away. If we build 1 level, we're back where we were. Only building 2 levels will get you, will end up with additional parking, which is the whole purpose here, not to end up where we are. Also, speaking of Honor Health, that entire land has been zoned for 150 feet of height. So you already have 150 feet that can be built across it. And also, the plan for what's going to be built on the Saguaro Hotel site, that's 90 feet. And in fact, I met with someone in the developer's team today, 90 feet. That's going to be behind Brown. The horses left the barn or the station, whatever the expression is. So to say that 2 feet is an eyesore, again, you got to look at what's the reason for this parking lot, and it's for the historic Old Town merchants to survive and prosper. So I hope that we can do both. It's a win-win scenario. Everyone's going to be happy. Thank you.
And Councilmember Durham.
Thank you. I want to ask Mr. Worth, what's the basis for the belief that the bond funds can't be used north of Indian School Road? Because I read the language, and it says the parking will be built at locations to be determined. So there was no specificity in the bond language. And so I don't understand why the bond funds can't be used in the Northeast Quadrant. And I'd be opposed to using general funds for the Brown parking lot because we have 3 parking lots in that vicinity, and I've never seen them totally used. We have the library parking lot, we have the performing arts parking lot, and we have the Brown Corral. And I've taken tours of those several times, and I've generally found them to be 1/3 to 1/2 utilized. And so the top floors are almost never utilized. If you go to the library parking lot, the top is not going to be filled with cars. It's not going to have hardly any cars in it. The same in the performing arts. As you go up the levels, there are fewer and fewer cars. I was just there for the Juneteenth celebration a couple of weeks ago, which was a pretty big celebration, and the top floors were empty. So I really don't understand the logic of adding even one story to Brown's Ranch, to the Brown Corral, because I don't think it'll be used. The basement is hardly ever used now. And if we're going to waste money, I would only waste money on one level and certainly not on two. So I just don't understand the logic of using general fund, of taking away bond funds from the Northeast Quadrant and shifting and using general funds for that location. I don't understand why there's the switch, and there's certainly no bait and switch, because the bond language specifically said we're going to put the garages in locations to be determined where the parking is needed. And I've seen nothing to indicate that the parking is needed on the Brown lot. And I think one of the last times we did this back in April, I asked if we could do some surveys to see the usage of those lots. And I'd be interested if we've done that. Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor, Councilmember Durham, your first question was something to the effect of why do we feel that there's no ability to spend bond money north of Indian School. When we presented this in April, I believe that we presented what you just said, that the language on the bond question, the ballot, was places to be determined in Old Town. The promotional materials that we used to inform the voters of what they were voting on went into some detail, and it included 3 example locations. The 3 example locations were all south of Indian School. We don't feel that that prohibits us from spending bond money north of Indian School, but the proposal that we're making avoids that discussion. It acknowledges that there is desire on the part of many people to spend it south of Indian School. We do spend it south of Indian School, and we use general fund for the garage north of Indian School. We don't feel it's required, but we feel that that respects both points of view.
Well, my point of view is I would see no reason to spend the money at the Brown Corral garage if it's not going to be used, and everything that I've ever observed tells me it won't be used. At least certainly not 2 floors aren't going to be used.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll go to Councilwoman Janik, and I do remind, this is a healthy discussion, but we also have to observe what is on the agenda in terms of the resolution. Councilwoman Janik, Vice Mayor Graham would be next.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dan. Good presentation. I worked on that bond committee, and I talked to a lot of people, and I did a lot of presentations. And the advertising indicated that this garage would be built in Old Town Scottsdale. And when people went to the polls, that's what they thought they were voting for. And I guarantee with this prime location that this garage will be filled most of the time. Not all the time, but you can go through the city in any time and find empty garages and take pictures. And I know that some of the people in the audience have done that. So just because it's not full at the particular time you were there doesn't mean there aren't other times. In addition to that, we have the new center, Civic Center Park Plaza, where there will be more people attending events in our downtown area. And for me, you cannot have enough parking because it's always, when you really, really need it, there's never enough. And I also think, I know that we need the parking in the Northeast Quadrant. I don't question that. I am very pleased that the funding is there to support that effort. And I think we need to be realistic that bringing the city together as one is a very, very important goal of Scottsdale. And I think by doing what Dan has suggested, we can accomplish that. So I feel very comfortable that both of these garages in 2 levels, at 2nd and Brown, along with the large version in the northeast quadrant, would be exceedingly appropriate for our city. And I'm very sure they will both be used quite a bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Graham.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Durham pondered or said he couldn't think of a reason to spend the money there. And one reason I can think of is that's exactly what voters told us to do. And I'm repeating what Councilmember Janik just said. So I want to remind my colleague that this isn't about most of the time. Most of the summer, it's going to be pretty empty. Most of the time, special events venues, stadiums are empty. It's about the parking you need when you need it. Spending money north of Indian School Road contradicts the command that voters gave us on the 2019 ballot. And Councilmember Janik made allusion to it, but we knew then that the Northeast had a parking shortage. We knew it way before 2019 that the Northeast had a parking shortage because that was by design. We've had a parking shortage in the Northeast for many, many years. We said on the ballot, Old Town, and any most reasonable, that would lead to the reasonable expectation that it would be built in the Old Town vicinity. I want to comment that we are putting our downtown merchants, Sonny Kirtley made a comment about it, Marilyn Atkinson via Sonny Kirtley made a comment about it. We're putting our downtown merchants and everybody who's invested a lot of money in that area, in the Brown area, at risk because we are at the behest of the Honor Health Facility. They can pull it anytime they want. We ask city staff. It's month to month. We don't pay for it. I don't understand how that works. There's no payment for it. They can yank it anytime they want. That's not a sustainable solution. We do need at least 2 additional levels of parking on the corral. We have skillful, experienced people with architecture and design expertise that will make it look Western, high quality, and inviting. We are dragging our feet, and residents are wondering if we are going to keep our word. And actually, the need for parking in the downtown, in that vicinity of the downtown, is worse than in 2019, 5 years ago, half a decade ago. We've expanded the Civic Center. There has been all sorts of expansion, the stadium improvements. A lot is going on down there. The need is actually greater today than when voters commanded us to build it half a decade ago. And the last comment I'll make for the time being is that this council just passed an annual budget, and that budget includes what some like to call a cookie jar of $15 million for general plan initiatives that can be spent on anything that the general plan calls for. The general plan makes reference directly to the Walker study. We have 350 merchants in the Northeast begging for help. They need more parking in the Northeast. We've known that for many years, not a surprise. And I say, let's use some of what some people call the cookie jar to get that process going. And that would be something that I support and would support the creation of this project. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, next we have Councilwoman Whitehead and Councilwoman Littlefield.
So, Mr. Worth, I just wanted to confirm the added, if the added or the extra bond funds can go to some of the park projects you mentioned, that I just wanted to confirm that.
Mayor, Councilwoman Whitehead, that is correct.
Yeah, as long as that's correct. I mean, it's, at the end of the day, the funding for the, I legally, absolutely, we can use the bond funding for the Northeast Quadrant. If we use those funds for one of our bond parks projects, that's fine too, and then use general fund dollars. I mean, it's, in this case, it's really irrelevant which way we go on that one. And I just want to point out, having been involved in the city for quite some time, it took 20 years to finish the bond projects from 2000. So nobody's sitting around wondering what we're doing. If we did all the bond projects at once, we would definitely hear from people because it'd be a heck of a lot of construction and a heck of a lot of tax increases. So we're definitely on schedule. We didn't need the parking garage during COVID. So I have spoken with a lot of property owners, people who actually do have who are stakeholders, and there is a need for parking in both locations, so I'm very comfortable with that. There's definitely some savings to be had if we go with the 2-story versus a 1-story. I liked Mr. Thompson's comment that we have a very capable architect in our mayor, and I'm sure that we can come up with a beautiful design for 2 stories, but we're here tonight to do what was really the direction from the last work study, which was designate different dollars for the Northeast Quadrant garage. So with that, I would like to motion to adopt a regular agenda item number 10, Old Town Parking and Parking Garage Update and Possible Creation of New Capital Improvement Project, and adopt resolution number 13157, authorizing fiscal year 24-25 starting today, and transfer up to $2 million from the general plan initiatives for the general plan designation in the general fund operating fund balance to a newly created CIP project entitled Build a New Parking Structure at Northeast Quadrant of Old Town.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. We also have Councilwoman Littlefield and Councilwoman Caputi to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councilman Janik and Councilman Graham on what they said. I think there's room for both of these garages, and they will be needed. If they aren't needed yet, they will be needed in the future as our city grows and expands and we build more and more apartments and complexes. It's going to happen. We're going to bring more people here, and they're going to bring their cars with them. They need parking. I think the Old Town, 2nd and Brown, that really needs to be built. It's been needed for a long time, and we haven't done it, and we need just to say, yeah, this is what we told the citizens during the bond election that we were going to do. This is how we asked them for their money, and we need to live up to those promises. As far as the Northeast Quadrant, I've talked to a number of people in staff about what is the need there and how does this happen, and they need it too. There's a shortage of parking there. They're using different funding sources for their garage. We're using bonds. Fine. Let's build both of them and build them 2 stories high. Thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Caputi, then myself.
Well, first of all, I am happy to see that we've landed in a good place. I know Mr. Thompson spoke about feeling strongly and wanting to say bad things, but actually I think we're going to end up in a good spot, and so I'm happy with that. I do want to say that we already established the need for a public parking structure in the Northeast Quadrant at our April work study, and I wasn't prepared to relitigate that. I think we did an excellent job of convincing and laying out the case. So I heard a couple things in the comments that I didn't find true, but again, we've already litigated that, and I don't really want to go back. We've definitely agreed that we need parking in the Northeast, and I don't think anyone is disputing that. The 2019 Bond Project 63 money does say that the money is going to be used for parking structures in Old Town at locations to be determined. I mean, if you were going to really parse all the language, I agree with Councilman Durham. It's open, but I also agree with the other comments tonight from the dais. There is this feeling amongst the residents that because we listed those 3 locations as specific examples, we probably did give that optic, and so there are people in the city who feel obligated to provide the parking there, and I have a hard time sort of fighting hard about that. I do want to remind people that we have negotiated for hundreds of spots south of Indian School. We have the Artisan, we've got Museum Square coming, but of course those timelines are not known. Having a project in the pipeline is no guarantee that it's going to get built. I totally understand why that makes people worried. Museum Square's been in the pipeline for 6 years and not moved, so many projects that are in our pipeline can take decades, and many never happen. So that's a great point, and I want to reiterate that. We could build at both locations with the bond money and not use general fund dollars, which I know some on the council have expressed discomfort with that, using general fund dollars to make up for bond shortages. But after thinking about this for a while, I think that I am okay making 2 separate projects. We're going to fund them with 2 separate buckets. But I just want to put in a little caveat here that now that we're freeing up the entire $21 million of bond money for parking south of Indian School, that certainly doesn't mean, yay, now we have $21 million, let's use it as a slush fund and put it, plunk it down. I still think that it requires being incredibly mindful of where we spend every dollar, because that's what we do on this dais. So I wasn't going to relitigate tonight, and I'm not going to, but we did discuss on April 16th that we have thousands of spots in and around the corral. There are 3 other structures within walking distance. Every single one of them has excess capacity, other than a few days of spring training. Again, we showed all the pictures. I can show pictures all day long. I've taken more pictures since. I know everyone will say, you took the picture on this day, or this day, or this day, but it wouldn't matter any day that I take the picture, other than the handful of spring training. That parking garage at the corral is empty. It is actually starting to acquire other residents in there. We have unintended consequences right now of having excess parking capacity, and again, that lot is always underutilized. And having more activities at the Civic Center do not all happen on one day. So I appreciate that comment, and I'm glad it's being reactivated, but more events doesn't mean more people, it simply means more days where people are parking. So again, I just want to caution that we not just build as much at the corral and spend the money. I think we need to be very careful about where we reallocate it. We want to have the best value. We want to take pressure off of our general fund. And then I do think that the mayor's point about this being historic Old Town is certainly relevant. Yes, we could make it pretty, but you are going to have a 2-story building in the heart of our historic Old Town. If it were any other building than a parking garage, I'm sure we would hear from the residents all sorts of pushback about building 2 stories down there. And then I also want to remind people we're moving the farmers market. So for whatever it's worth, that's going to have to go somewhere else, and it's something to think about. And then I just want to leave everyone with sort of we had also talked a lot about improving the wayfinding for the current parking. And so I would say whatever parking we build, let's make sure we do a better job with wayfinding, because I'm still hearing that nonstop. I tell people how much parking we have downtown, how much extra parking we have downtown, and I always hear, where is it, where is it? So I would just encourage us as a city and as a council to keep making better usage of the parking structures that we already have and make sure people know where they are. So Again, I could show pictures all day long. I think it's great that we're going to find a solution to make everybody happy. I would just caution that we not just throw all the extra money into the corral. I really don't think that, again, it is empty 95% of the time. I can drive you there any day of the week. I would just really caution this council to take a very close look at exactly where we want that additional parking south of Indian School. Thank you.
Okay, I will speak, and hopefully we'll come to a vote here. You know, I've been in Old Town for over 38 years, and I know people and businesses in every quadrant. And I say that from professionals like Scudder Gookin and some of the restaurants in the Northeast Quadrant, all over Fifth Avenue into Old Town. And they're real people. And I totally agree with that, these are the backbone of the personality of our Old Town, our downtown, and they have many loyal clients, as well as they want to have a front door to new prospects and new customers. Remember that this process was useful going through the work study. The two locations are not mutually exclusive. It's not one or the other one. And I say that because although we have a 3-hour parking limit, some of the description for the Northeast Quadrant was, gee, people are coming in for a dentist appointment or whatever, and they need a good turnaround, maybe 30 to 45 minutes. There's others that in parts of Main Street that they come in for the full 3 hours, do some shopping and eat and so forth. So it's an interesting mix, and it really, you have to appreciate that from the outcry. The point that's been made is that they've got a preliminary budget, and on one hand, it looks like we're fast tracking and the possibility of a parking garage in the Northeast Quadrant. And it can be argued that it's long overdue. So there again, because there's lacking of space on that area and at that parking lot. I'm good with that. The possibility of meeting the needs of those businesses in the Northeast Quadrant is valid. I'm still very concerned about the historic nature of the historic Old Town. Basically, I was on council in '02 when we named, I believe, 11 buildings and locations, including the church there, as historic value, and one of them's on the state register as well, which is wonderful. So encroaching too much in front of that property, I can say this because I'd like to throw in my 2 bits. I don't get to be on DR board. My peers get to be there, excuse me. I'm sorry, thank you. I'd like to see at least some step back on that parking garage. At least one, at least even with the Noriega Rodeo building or whatever, that museum. I say that because it needs some breathing room. We have to respect that. It may be a loss of 20 spaces, but it's worth it in terms of respecting that area. The push and pull, any acrimony about, our intentions is, again, I can go back 20 years and say we added 2 parking garages, the Noriega one and the one on Fifth Avenue access, and we used general funds back then on council. So we didn't have a bond project for that. And they both got done. I think they were built for under $6 million, and there's got to be about 300 spaces in each of those, well, anyway, at Fifth Avenue. So it can be done. It can be done, and there's almost an equilibrium with that. If we can get better signage, have fast turnover. Remember, it's not about necessarily the number of spaces, it's about the turnover. It's just like tables at a restaurant, right? You may have 100 tables, but you want 3 turns. You don't want to have 200 tables when you only have, half the turns. So that's what keeps the energy in Old Town. That's excitement. That's the positive nature of this. So with that, I'm hoping we can conclude with our Vice Mayor Graham.
Well, there's a motion in a second,
Yeah,
right?
there's a motion in a
Okay,
second,
okay.
so I just want to
I just had a question for maybe City Attorney on what we're voting on.
Yeah.
We're voting to create, City Attorney, a CIP project for the Northeast Quadrant. Does this vote have anything to do with the 2019 bond funds or the southeast section of the downtown?
The Mayor
Yes,
and
please.
Vice Mayor Graham, yeah, Resolution 13157, and I had it pulled out earlier, but I think I've put it away, is just authorizing the transfer of up to $2 million from the general plan designation in the general fund operating fund balance to a newly created CIP project in the northeast quadrant of Old Town.
Okay, so nothing to do with 2019 bonds or southeast, so kind of remains unresolved.
Good. Thank you. Any other
Thank you.
question? Okay, so Councilwoman Janik, are we ready for a question here?
Yeah, real quick, thank you, Mayor. My question is similar to Councilmember Graham. Is there anything we can do now to promote the garage in the Corral location? Or that's another question for another time?
Well,
That's where I'm kind of
you know what, I
confused.
think that's an excellent reference because it was part of our discussion right now. And I think we would expect that the staff could come back with some timetable, maybe after recess, so we would be more aware
Yeah.
of that. That's a separate decision, but,
Yes,
you know,
yeah,
so
yeah.
that's another
City manager.
continuation of this process. Go ahead, City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Yes, this evening strictly to approve for us to, and then let me explain it a little bit further. The $2 million, that designation out of the general fund contingency, leaving us $13 million in that fund for this year, then we would add the parking structure. It's going to take us a while to design in the northeast quadrant. And so certainly we'd probably be completing that near and have a definitive number to add to the CIP for next year, which then we could take out of the general fund. We could take the remaining, even if we build 1 or 2 stories, and apply it as well, because the bond question would allow it. But regardless, we already have the money approved for bond project to move forward. So what we're hearing tonight is to move forward with 2 stories, potentially a setback if I'm just looking at what I think we're hearing. So we'll come back with definitive on that as well, and bring that forward for all your consideration. But by taking the action tonight, we're already looking at the northeast quadrant limited to the general fund and looking at a CIP to backfill that. So we would get design done this year with the $2 million. We would turn around next year having the CIP to start that project. No different on the bond. And I'd like to question, or to make a statement on that as well. When we did our bonds, it was great points that many of our bond projects takes years to complete. And there was a couple things, because we had the pandemic, because we had escalation in costs, and all the other things we've been challenged with, we continue to accomplish all our bond projects regardless. And so we're fortunate that we're able to do that for the community. But more so that the timing of the projects, this was never the one at the forefront. This was towards the tail end. There's another one out there, which is the Thompson Peak Bridge. That was towards the tail end too. When we looked at the timelines of when we wished to accomplish these, we had a couple little hiccups in the sense that we had a pandemic and we had some other issues with crazy escalating costs, and we put the stables, which was going to be the first one out at Westworld, towards the tail end because lumber went up 300%, and we waited for it to come down, which we knew it would. So there's things like that that we had to change. But outside of that, we have not changed the direction. We moved up a little bit the dog park, but outside of that, and then we ran into an issue with SRP, but we worked through that. But other than that, it's pretty much the timeline we shared with the community. And so just want to make that clear that we're still on those timelines. We're not behind schedule by any means on these projects. We only have so much capacity, and we've also been dealing with a lot of challenges on increasing of costs. So I think we're in a good place. I think we'll try to get both done. We'll be back before you to get a definitive on on the corral site, and we're moving forward this evening with the design of the northeast, if in fact you approve the motion on the floor. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Manager.
Councilwoman Whitehead and
Thank you, Mayor. There was one question of the sort I had forgotten to ask. I had one of the property owners asked, when are we expecting just a very preliminary design for the corral garage?
Well, for the Mayor, Councilwoman Whitehead, for the corral, we have to nail down exactly what it is we're doing. I'll refer to what the city manager just mentioned. We're going to come back to you with a timeline and a proposal. We do have all the, if that's the direction, 2 stories and Second and Brown, we've got all the approval that we need. We've got the project approved, we got the funding approved. I just need to make sure that we're straight on your direction. So we're going to come back and confirm that. At that point in time, I would anticipate somewhere around 3 or 4 months, we have to go through a solicitation process and bring in a design team, or most likely a design build team, before we start doing design work on that. And when we start doing design work, we will be doing public outreach and ensuring that we're getting viewpoints from the people in the area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're ready to vote. Please record your vote. Okay, we are unanimous. Thank you for your patience, and we will continue with our meeting.